I wanted to do this video a while ago, but sometimes I think there's another story that came by that I wanted to actually do a video on, and I did that instead. Well, it's just I find in YouTube different sectors it can be problematic for me because and this I think is why I get along sometimes with some mammy channels sometimes with this. Like one point, I don't know if we would call her a mammy actually, or just crazy. Not really sure. It really doesn't have to do with anything, but this was one part that I always disliked about colorism and the idea of associating with um, aspects of other races and like the divestment movement and the swirler movement, they try to conflate them together sometimes. You'll see on certain platforms they often talk about colorism together with the other thing. And I never understood this because it was always like, you know, to me it's like I don't I guess I understand it because, I've always seen it where, like, I don't like colorism. So, I mean, I think, like, when people push colorism, they kind of push darker skin and darker people as lesser than, and they put a perception of dark skinned people as if they are inferior, you know, as if they work from a place that is basically lesser just because they're darker, and that everyone perceives them as lesser because, they're darker. When many of the time they claim this, but the very people they claim do it don't even know that they're darker because they might think that they're just the same as someone who's lighter, um, because it all has to do with basically perception at the end of the day. But on to what I'm trying to talk about. First point I want to address is I feel like often people conflate the colorism side to it, and many of the other aspects, but I'll get into that later. But the colorism side to it with the divester side and spoiler side. And it's always weird because to me it's always like I've seen on some channels and they almost act like it's a way to make better with their situation of being darker, which, I mean, isn't very shocking to me because it's like some colorism channels, I say most, if not all, focus, well, not all, but I would say many, focus on how, they don't like their skin tone and how to basically get away from that. It goes well with the whole self-hate narrative. But I don't really feel, swirling and divestment has to do with, erasure or, not wanting to be what you are. It's actually quite the opposite, honestly. Um, but I feel like often people seem to convey basically a different message. Then there's this whole part of it that I really don't like. Because with colorism, people will always talk about black men, dark skinned black men, and how they don't like themselves and they don't find themselves to be the ideal man. Their manhood has been diminished since, black people came to America. And, you know, they sometimes have this whole idea and perception of making it where, black men basically don't prefer darker skinned women and more Afrocentric women. And it kind of like makes this whole idea that, black women generally will basically have some type of preference towards black men. But then, because of colorism and other issues, then they go to other races. And I mean, I just always find it weird because it's like I find so many times in the spaces of like swirlers and divestors, it seems like there's always this idea among them, not all of them, but some of them, where they talk about having been with black men and, having some type of preference towards black men. And to me, it's just like always a little uncomfortable because it's like, I don't think that's the reason many people are actually, you know, swirlers or divestors. I think many people could naturally just not be into black men on their own. It doesn't have to do with anything that black men may do or not do. You know what I mean? Like if you're not attracted to a black men, then you're not going to go towards them. You're not going to be interested in them. You're not even going to really consider. Now, you may consider in the sense of actual problematic situations, but you're not going to basically entertain like the viability of a relationship with a black man if you have no sexual attraction to black men to begin with. It's like often on these channels, though, and these spaces, people seem to always assume that there was an attraction to black men at one point. Like, people often seem to even assume, like there had to be some relationship or something that went wrong or something, and someone decided to, divest or swirl or something. And it's like, to me, it's just like, I don't understand why people always think that this means, that you can't naturally just not be into black men without even having a hate issue or any problem with black men. Because you'll also find things like that where you find people who are, upset at black men, or, the assumption that black women are upset at black men if they're not with them. Like, why? I've noticed, honestly, personally, that the women who sleep with black men and are mammies seem like they're the most angry at black men. And that might be for several reasons. And I don't like to get into it because to me it's like making assumptions about things. Like, I don't like to make assumptions about black men, if you didn't notice that. I don't like to make assumptions about people on their skin tone. other than their looks, you know. To me, it's like, well, if I'm not attracted to your look, then, you know, there's nothing I'm assuming. I'm looking right at your face. You get what I'm saying? So I'm not making any assumption on someone just because I'm not attracted to them. That's the physical reaction or lack thereof. But for the whole point of, you know, behavior and things of that nature, I'm not going to say that I assume that, you know, black women who are with black men, that, you know, they're upset with black men because they chose to be with a black man. I think people vary when it comes to behavior and the type of person someone is, and that's not defined by their race or their gender. But going back to what I was saying, it always seems like people who are involved with black men complain about black men the most because they're with them. And I don't know. Maybe they're not finding the right person or whatever's going on. Personally, for me, it's just like, I never understood this. Now, why would someone like who's never been with black men have any issue with black men in regard to how they are as a husband or father or whatever? You know, if you're not involved with them and you don't have any involvement with them, you know, I don't have a black father. I didn't come from a black man. My father wasn't black. Um, I don't have any brothers, and if I did, they wouldn't be black either, probably, if they came from my father. Anyway, so I mean, I don't have any black men in my life, and I guess some people are different because maybe they have a black father or brothers or whatever. I can't speak for them, but I mean, like, for the people who have, like, you know, their, you know, an ex or sons or, you know, something that implies that they preferred black men at one point in their life. I never understood why that's associated with being a swirler or being divested. As if, you know, at one point in life you had to have given black men a chance. That's like assuming, it's like assuming that everyone likes the same type of, you know, the same the same type of music or something. Like, why would you assume someone would, like, we all prefer the same thing just because of our skin tone, you know? To me, it's the same thing here. You guys assume that we must have been involved with black men at some point. And, you know, we must have been interested in black men at one point. And to me, it's like, I never understood this because it's like, if I don't think any amount of anger can really make someone turn their preference into another race or someone who's completely different physically than, you know, what they're usually dating. People who even do that, who have issues with black men, obviously had interest in both races all along. They just changed their opinion on it. I don't understand why it's such a shock that someone would only be attracted to, you know, 80% of the population of men as opposed to 13% of the population of men who are black who nobody really gets to see often. I mean, like, honestly, if you don't grow up in a black neighborhood or things of that nature, you're not going to really be around them. And if you're not around them, then how can you grow an attraction towards people you've never really even seen? Sometimes, though, like I said, I just feel like with the whole idea of, colorism and, divestors and the whole idea of the whole issue with like the gender wars and things of that nature as well. It's to me, like, I feel often that people don't really think of the reality of preferring other races, rather, they just think about the opposite sex of their race and how it affects them or how to trash them. And it's like for me, when I'm thinking of who I'm attracted to, I'm not thinking of any black man. It's just not going through my head. It's not like out of malice, anger, or anything like that. It's not to attack black men. It's just, I just innately don't think of them. It's like you asking me if I think of cartoons when I think of men that I'm attracted to or something. It's off the wall to me. I mean, like understand I would have no understanding why those things I just mentioned would have anything to do with any man I'm attracted to. And I feel like it's easy to spot fake divestors, honestly, because it's like they always are talking about black men and how they have issues with black men. And they specifically talk about relationships with black men and all their long sordid experiences with black men and their relationships with black men. And it's like, to me, I just don't understand, like, why talk so in depth about relationships with black men if you're not interested in black men. But honestly, who could ever really say someone like that is not interested in black men? It's funny to me, honestly, because it's like if you've been with a black man, if you've been in a relationship with a black man, then obviously you were into a black man. Obviously, you like black men. I mean, even now, you just block it out of your head, but you still have capability to be attracted to a black man. Um, so I mean, like it's hard for me personally to relate to that because it's almost like in many experiences that I've had here, like it's expected to have some kind of anger towards black men because you've been with black men or something of that nature. And for me, the only issue I ever have is the whole situation with harassment. And I can't even really talk about that in divested sectors too much because then they get triggered by it because I guess they had their own problems with black men and I don't know what's going on there, but for me that's the only problem I've ever had was harassment. I don't like obviously being hit on by people I'm not interested in. And it can get in the way of a lot of different things at work, trying to buy groceries, trying to do anything, and people start harassing you. It's very uncomfortable. um Other than that, though, I just don't relate to the full anger of the situation, like people who have anger so deeply in their platforms is just like I can't relate to that. And I mean, with the other side of it, like the swirlers on the other side, I always find it like they always seem like they assume, with being a black woman who's a swirler, that I should have some issue, I guess, with black men or white women or things like that. And it's so funny because it's like, for me, I prefer white women, being completely honest. I don't mean to say that in a mean way either. It's just what I'm used to, honestly. I mean, that's who I mainly grew up with. So, I mean, like, I always find that weird. It's like, I don't have any issue with, you know, white people. If I did have issues with white people, then why do I choose to swirl? And why am I divested? Like, I never understood that. But in the end, I just feel like people who have these aspects to their divested, I guess, message or whatever, it's like I feel like they make divestors look the worst. The reason they look the worst is because basically you're upset about, what kind of guy you got, or you're upset about whatever somebody did you wrong, or you felt like, you couldn't get anyone that you wanted within or whatever, in the case of colorism, that is. And I don't even think that's true. They kind of paint it that way, which is just weird. Um, you make us look bad because you make it seem like, one, we've all been with black men, or we've all been attracted to black men, and something went wrong. When it could have just been that nothing went wrong ever, and you never had any issue with, black men as people. You just never saw them as, somebody that you're supposed to be with, in a sexual sense. I mean, like, everybody has a man that they will not have any sexual attraction towards. And everyone has a woman that they will never have any sexual attraction towards. And this is about heterosexual people, of course. So, I mean, I never really understood why this assumption and this narrative is made by divestors and swirlers, because it's like often people don't really pay attention to how it makes, black women look as a whole. And that's what I just don't appreciate. I feel like often people love to, associate black female swirlers, with colorism and like the aspects of it, just to make it out to be like that every black woman is like attracted to black men, even though we're not. And to also make black women just look bad as a whole. But I just feel like often with divested spaces, they don't do enough to prove that this isn't the case. And I understand for some women who are divestors, maybe this is true for them. And I'm not saying anything against them for that. But you can understand why personally I wouldn't want to be associated with that aspect. I don't appreciate that aspect because it's like that's not my story, that's not my struggle, that's not even my problem, you know? My problem with the black community as far as divesting and being a swirler has always been just the fact that I'm not attracted to black men, which has caused some trouble in the past. But honestly, I would say, has it really been any different for anyone else who, may not find men attractive, for example. Like, I would say it probably isn't, maybe. So, I mean, like, anyway, my point is, I just feel like tying colorism, with that sector of Black women, it kind of makes it where you can't really truly be a divester or truly be a swirler. Because if you are a true swirler or true divester, it's clouded with trying to mask it in the idea that, every Black woman basically was at one point a mammy, you know. And I just don't think we were all mammies at one point. I think some of us were actually natural born divestors. So that's all I have to say on this, and I'm gonna get to going to work soon. So thanks for listening. All right, bye.